Hello there, and welcome back, hopefully. In today's video, I'll be going over my smoke and fire shaders. This is going to be predominantly working with nodes. This is the setup I like to use for my crash simulations or any like smoke and fire simulation I'm making. It's a little it's a little bit of work, but it's very simple to pick up. It's not too complex, but it gives you a great amount of customizability, and that's why I love it. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So here I have a smoke simulation already pre-baked. There is noise added in here, and it's decently high res. So in order to see how this simulation works, how the fire works, I'm going to go into rendered view. Obviously, there's nothing in here because I have this domain selected and we have nothing in the material output slot. I'm going to enable screencast that does anything. I'm going to go Shift A into my shading workspace. You can go into this tab here if you want to do it like that, or I just have it in my layout like this. So I'm going to go Shift A and I'm going to add in a volume, principled volume node. So this is kind of the basis. Plug in the volume into the material output. You're going to want to play around with the density because the density just makes it thicker. Higher density makes it thicker, lower density makes it less thicker. Next thing we got to add is an attribute node. In this attribute node, we're going to type in density, and obviously it's going to dictate the density of whatever thing we're going to do, and in this case, it's going to be the smoke. So everything here, we're working with the smoke. We're going to plug that attribute into the color. It doesn't really change the color, but this is how you can manipulate it through here. We just add in a color ramp. Color ramps are really cool in shading and noding because, man, they help you out a lot. So I'm gonna hit this plus sign here, and it's gonna be able to, you can use this plus sign to basically change your color. So I'm gonna change it to this like nice brown color and whatnot. And you can slide it up and you can see the different values you're gonna get. So, I slide it this way, it becomes really dark or brown. Keep it in the middle, it's kind of a good mixture of gray and brown. I can also play around with that black slider and slide it up and it'll look really cool. So I just highlighted density right there. That density allows you to make it thicker and whatnot. So now we're going to add in a Fresnel node. This Fresnel is going to help with our density, and we're going to plug this Fresnel node into a math node. Change it from addition to multiply, and then we're going to take the value and we're going to plug it into the density because it's going to have direct impact. Now don't panic, this is like the first start. You can see we can play around with this value and you can increase the density of that smoke, but we're going to do a few other tricks to kind of make the smoke a little bit more realistic and more high quality. So first of all, we're going to add another math node because 2 math nodes will help you just go up, increase the density pretty fast with both of them multiplying without having to have a crazy number in there. You can do a 1 math node, but I don't really recommend that. 2 is better. So now we're going to take the factor of that density attribute and we're going to plug it into the top value. And basically what it's going to do is just give your smoke a little bit more life. Make it look a little bit better. You can see that kind of like playing around with that value here. It's a lot brighter, and when we multiply this, like, whoa, it makes a big puffy darker cloud. So that's why we use 2 math nodes, because it's just easier to do it that way. Multiplying that value by 2, and you can increase that value and it will become denser, and you can decrease that other value and it'll become even more denser, and you can do either or. They're multiplying with each other, so just it's multiplication. You understand how quickly it can get up. So that's pretty much the part for this. I just changed this to optics so I can see it a little bit better. That's the part for smoke. These things fully control the smoke. So you can control the color, you can control the density, the thickness. These values right here, they control the density. You can have 0 if you want. It's really whatever you want. The world is yours. You can make it darker. I kind of like darker smokes are good for like oil rig explosions and stuff. You can play around with the brown, give it a little bit brown, make it orange, green, like I said, it's your world. You just gotta move it. So I'm gonna move these nodes down the volume, so because now we're gonna get on the flame. There is a flame in this simulation, as you can see. I'm gonna click this. It says fire and smoke, but there's no fire yet. That's because we haven't given it any fire yet. So this emission strength and this emission color. The emission color is what color that fire you want it to be. So we're gonna input this through notes because it gives you way better control over it and more realistic control over it. The volume isn't really good. The principal volume isn't really good. So I'm duplicating this attribute node and I'm gonna put it down underneath here, underneath the Fresnel node, and this will be the beginning of all the fire. So now I'm going to add in a math node. This math node, I'm going to change it to power. I'm changing the value first to 0.8 before I change it to power, because what do you call it? Oh, you can do this in any order. I'm going to connect this to the emission strength first, then you can see how it kind of just brightens up and makes this like whole thing look really white. That's the emission coming through. I'm changing this to power. There it is. And now that we have the power, you can increase it, and obviously you can see it changes it around a little bit. Don't see too much emission yet, but that's because we need to duplicate this power node, 0.8. I'm going to change the value to 7. You can see there's a little bit left. There's maybe a little bit of fire in there, but it's nothing too crazy yet, because this next part, this is when we're going to start being able to see the fire a little bit better, or at least it's going to help a good amount. We're going to add in a gamma node. This gamma node, it's basically controlled like the intensity of the fire, sort of. Once we finish this shader layout, this node layout, you'll be able to see. It's kind of just, it's tough doing it, explaining it from here because it's tough to see. I'm gonna add in 2 math multiply nodes with the values. I'm gonna turn down the value with the closest one, but once again, it's like multiplication. The reason being is because that node in between, that math node in between, we're gonna plug something into it. So we're gonna duplicate the attribute node down below, and we're gonna change the name. We can add it in through there. I'm going to change the name to temperature, lowercase t. So this is going to kind of dictate the temperature of our explosion. You'll see what I mean once we get into it. I'm going to plug the factor into that math multiply node, and you can see we'll kind of, there's still not fire yet. That's because we haven't added in the fire yet. We got to change the emission color. I'm going to duplicate this power node, and I'm going to change it to an add. So this add, we're going to change the value to 0.5. I don't recommend playing with this value in the future. It's not that important. Well, it's important, but it's not what you want to be changing. You want to be changing this value here. This will allow to dictate your temperature. So that white right there, that's kind of the smoke. If you look underneath our principal volume, you can see there's emission color. It's white. We would need to change this. So if we change this to a little bit of more of a green, you can see that's our emission. That's where the emission is coming from. It's pretty cool. So how do we dictate this value? Well, we add in a black body. The black body is really cool because the temperature value that it gives is basically the one you're gonna want to change, and you're gonna get different like realistic fires. It's probably the most realistic one you get. So you can see we give it this 1500, the default. It's kind of this yellowish. It's kind of masquerading with the, what do you call, the smoke, because the smoke is like the same color. So I'm gonna change, you can see changing the smoke values around, it makes it different. I'm just gonna delete the smoke value in total, so it's just with black and white. There we go. I think that looks pretty cool with the black. The black on the white, it'll kind of give it like a black grayish white thing. Now, what happens when we play around with this temperature value? Well, if we decrease it, you can see we gotta decrease it by a lot before we actually start seeing changes, and it gets redder. So kind of like, kind of like the pits of hell red, I guess you could say. And the lower the value goes, the redder it gets. So I guess you could say the fire gets more dense. But if we increase it, it becomes orange. And you can increase this value by a lot. You can play around with the value, so this will really help you out figure out what kind of fire you want. And I think this fire looks pretty pretty good right now. You can see it has like fire, there's smoke, there's orange, there's all this stuff. And I'm just gonna skip around the timeline to find like different areas, and you can obviously keyframe where you want the fire to be. It's hottest, it's coldest, whatever, where you want it red. You can keyframe these things in there. So we're gonna play around with the gamma. So if we drop the gamma all the way up, you can see it kind of makes it dense. So there's only fire in the middle, which is kind of a more unique look, kind of like a finishing. But if we turn the gamma all the way down, you can see it's just a big ball of fire, which is kind of cool also. So you can play with the gamma, you can see how it changes it around. It's a fun one, but I recommend keeping between that 1 to 2 range. I think higher isn't going to do much. So now these values here, they all dictate your fire. They play around with your fire. So you can either have, no fire, or you can have a big ball of fire. It's like, you get to choose this. You can have everything be fire, you can have nothing be fire. And don't go negative, because if you go negative, you can see it really messes around with the values. But if you bring it down to like a happy, medium, normal, 5, I recommend just tweaking these values here. This value at the end. This one is the only one you need to do for your temperature, and you'll get all the success you need in the world with any smoke simulation. Now, these values, I don't recommend, like I said, don't mess around with this add value that I'm moving around. It's not that important. It's really this value right now. I'm just looking to find like a good little color. You can see if I decrease it, there'll be less fire. If I increase it, there'll be a little bit more orange. If I play with this add value, you can see it does the same thing that multiply does. So it's better to just change one variable as opposed to many other variables. That's important. So those values, all that I just highlighted, these are all dealing with this density. As you can see, we can make it darker, we can make it grayer. It gives you a lot of customizability, and you can see like happening like right in front of you, which is awesome. And like honestly, that looks like a pretty decent explosion. It's not even that high res, and it's just because you got good shaders going for you, and that's sometimes all you need. So same thing with the fire. Just change that multiply node right there. That one all the way at the edge, because that's the one, like I said, the less variables you change, the better. And you can keyframe these things in here. Lowering the value, once again, it makes it hotter, colder. That only plays with the fire. This plays around with the smoke, so you can have a very hot explosion. You can drop it all the way down. You can have 0 smoke. You can really do it, and this shows really like how the fire looks. So if you want to just check out how the fire looks, you want more fire, less fire, you can turn that value all the way down in the smoke to 0, or something very low. And then you just change that fire value up, and you play around with it. You can just test how it looks. And that looks like there's a lot of fire and a good amount of smoke, so like an explosion just happening, that'd probably be a good look for it. And once again, you can keyframe things in here. The gamma, you can play around with the gamma. Like I said, 1 to 2 is probably the best for the gamma. You can do crazier stuff. If you just want a ball of fire, then if you want a ball of smoke, zing that thing up. If you want a ball of fire, you can fully just hold that thing down. So that gamma also is pretty powerful too, because that also determines how much smoke and fire there is. And now I'm just gonna look for some nice, like, decent settings, just to kind of touch it up. And this looks pretty good. Lower the temperature a bit, less fire, and it looks pretty good, honestly. I mean, not even for that high of a smoke simulation, it actually looks pretty good. And with a little bit of noise. And this is my shader setup, so if any of you guys want to copy it, feel free. I'm gonna wrap up the video here, so if you enjoy, please subscribe, and thank you for watching. Feel free to steal any of these shaders.